Welcome to Planet America. I'm John Barron.
I'm Licciardello.
This week, Iowa's caucus chaos.
Chaos.
Yes, of course.
Mayor Pete is in the lead, but who knows?
And who would have guessed a process that includes tossing coins would go so badly?
It's a shocker. Also this week, what happens if Bernie Sanders wins the White House? We'll sit down with his top economic advisor, Steph Kelton.
We are the wealthiest country on earth, so why shouldn't we be able to provide even more generous benefits than any other country?
And we'll also have the latest on Trump's impeachment trial, but first...
This incredibly long and expensive election campaign leading to the statistically likely re-election of President Trump 2020.
For months, we've been wondering who would win the Iowa caucuses, the crucial first vote in the process to select the Democratic presidential nominee. And tonight, more than 30 hours after the final results were expected, we're still kind of wondering. Remarkably, it wasn't until 19 hours after the caucuses ended that the Iowa Democratic Party even released the first numbers, for reasons we'll go into in a moment, but here they are. With 62% of precincts reporting, former Mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg, has just under 27%. Second, Independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont on a shade over 25%. Third, Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts around 18%. Then the real shocker, former Vice President Joe Biden relegated to fourth place with 15.6%. Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota next on around 12%. The rest, including Yang and Steyer, were mostly unviable. Those results are a percentage of state delegates, and that is the measure by which the winner will be declared. Supporters of Bernie Sanders, though, point to the fact that he has more votes, and his campaign says they think Bernie will be declared the overall winner when all the numbers are tallied anyway.
You may be wondering how it's even possible that right now Sanders is winning the most votes, but Buttigieg is winning the most delegates. Well, the delegate allocation rewards consistency right across the map rather than running out big totals in fewer counties. And if we look at the county map, you can see that at least so far, Buttigieg is winning about 2/3 of the counties, over twice as many as Sanders is winning. Buttigieg did make a point of targeting those more conservative counties, and it worked. In fact, Buttigieg even might have solved that problem he has with black supporters.
Really?
Yeah, look at this. Those right behind him there. Oh, actually, they seem to be the only black people in the entire hall.
That old trick.
Forget that.
Right.
He did do well, though.
Yes, although more than who did well and who did not do well in Iowa in 2020, this year's caucuses will probably be remembered as the one where nobody knew the result on the night or for most of the next day. These caucuses are a very robust, very public form of democracy, basically a town hall meeting with 2 rounds of voting to decide their preferred presidential candidates. They're held in 1,678 school gyms and town halls across Iowa's 99 counties. Lots of pep rally style chants for the candidates, neighbours trying to convince each other to support some other candidate, speeches, shows of hands. They test the 15% viability. They have a second head count. It is messy, but mostly good-natured and fun. It's the way it's been for decades and decades. And it was all over by 9 p.m. local time on Monday night. But as the caucus goers headed off into the snowy winter's night and the panels of cable news pundits sat expectantly by, the minutes were ticking away. There were no results. An hour later, still nothing. Something was wrong.
It certainly was, and the issues seemed to be centred around a new app that the Democrats were using to process their results. It wasn't working properly, so the 1,700 odd precincts tried to report their results via the backup phone line instead. Unfortunately, the reporting phone line and the app helpline were the same phone number. So all the callers got in each other's way and the line was permanently engaged. Those who did get through were on hold for hours, leading to vaudevillian moments like this on CNN.
I'm just waiting on hold and doing my best to report the results from my precinct.
What are you hearing? I know you're listening to a conversation from the Iowa Democratic Party.
So this is a real coincidence, Wolf. I just got off hold just now, so I've got to get off the phone to report the results.
All right, go ahead. Report your results. Can we listen in as you report them, Sean?
Yep.
All right,
cool.
Let's listen.
All right. Okay. Hi. Hello? They hung up on me. They hung up on me.
Sucks to be him. So, John, tell us about that app.
Yeah, well, every one of those caucuses we're talking about has a caucus manager. It's usually a local party official. And they're the ones who are responsible for keeping track of the numbers, checking the caucus preference cards, filling out a results form. Now, they were encouraged to then enter that information into the app, which should have already been downloaded onto their phone or mobile device. Questions were being raised as early as last week, though, about the security of the apps themselves. And so the Iowa Democratic Party officials at the time were keeping the specifics of the app confidential until the last minute in what they called a strategic move to ensure it remains secure and out of hackers' crosshairs. It remained secure, all right, so secure that in the days leading up to caucus night, many precinct managers could not download the app. If they could download the app, they couldn't log on. And when they could get on, not all the data they entered actually went in, and only partial results were being saved.
Yeah, so secure, in fact, was that system, John, that when the cybersecurity wing of the Department of Homeland Security earlier offered to do security testing for the Iowa Democratic Party, they declined the offer. The Iowa Democratic chairman put it this way.
You have a nightmare scenario, and if so, what do you do about it?
These are probably the most prepared we've ever been as a party for these caucuses. We've run through a few different scenarios, but I can tell you we're ready.
Oops.
Oops, indeed. So, after the caucus managers couldn't get any officials on the phone, some of them drove to party headquarters in Des Moines with photos on their phones of the caucus forms, only to be told, go away. The whole schmozzle had the Dean of the Iowa Press Corps, David Yepsen, who'd warned about just this kind of a problem a few months ago, declaring RIP caucuses.
He wasn't the only one weighing in, John. The candidates' teams are all trying to spin the fiasco. Sanders' surrogate Ilhan Omar, for instance, was spreading conspiracy theories that the company that made the app, Shadow, was also paid by Pete Buttigieg, and so it was not a coincidence that the app crashed and Buttigieg claimed victory without results. Biden's surrogate, Chris Dodd, tried to obscure Biden's woeful performance by agreeing that the Iowa caucus results had been discredited, saying, if this is wrong, what else is wrong? Although my personal favourite was Elizabeth Warren's chief strategist, who tweeted, any campaign putting out incomplete numbers is contributing to the chaos and misinformation, before also tweeting, Biden came a distant fourth.
Yeah, I'm the one to spread rumours, but have you heard the one about? Meanwhile, President Trump was blaming Democrats and defending Iowa.
It is not the fault of Iowa. It is the do-nothing Democrats' fault. As long as I am president, Iowa will stay where it is. Important tradition.
And he sure likes Iowa. The Republican Party held its own Iowa caucuses this week, with President Trump up against his two primary challengers, Congressman Joe Walsh and former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld. And it was a nail-biter, Chaz, with Weld winning just 76 more votes than Walsh, with President Trump just 30,998 votes in front of them.
Oh, big upset there, John. Just one more thing on the Democrats, though. Let's not forget, the reason the Democrats were trying to overhaul their process was because until now, the Iowa caucuses for both parties had zero accountability or transparency. And even now, this last night was still only the second biggest fiasco in recent Iowa history.
I remember it well.
Yeah, in 2012, the Republicans changed their mind about who won the caucuses 16 days after they'd announced a winner. And even then, they admitted they weren't completely sure they were right. So this could always get worse.
Yeah, I was there that night in Des Moines, and at the time they said, this is the last Iowa caucus ever. This is going to kill it off. They're saying the same thing now. Meanwhile, a week out from the next primary in New Hampshire, the polls have been moving towards Bernie Sanders. He is 9 points ahead in the average of polls today. Then comes Biden, with Warren and Buttigieg close behind, and Klobuchar at under 7%. Like Iowa, New Hampshire has seen the top four Democrats take their turn at the top of the polls since November last year, so a late shift could be on the cards in the next few days. Bear in mind, Bernie won New Hampshire by a very solid 22 points back in 2016.
Looking at that polling though, it does suggest that this shambles in Iowa could help Sanders out. The massive asterisk over the Iowa results makes New Hampshire seem even more important, so that could play right into Bernie's hands. One more benefit for Sanders while I'm at it. His whole theory is that he brings new voters to the Democrats, but the turnout yesterday was only about 2/3 of the Iowa turnout in 2008. Right. And as for new voters, only 35% of the people there yesterday were first-time caucus goers, according to NBC's entrance polls, which is a fairly underwhelming share. So Sanders did not deliver. But we're not talking about that, are we? We're talking about ups. So that's also good for Sanders.
Yes, but perhaps the biggest winner out of losing in Iowa may in fact be Joe Biden, Chaz, because in an ordinary year, if the national frontrunner came fourth in Iowa, they would be in huge trouble, and that would be the lead story today. Remember what a third place finish did for Howard Dean in 2004 and Hillary Clinton in 2008. All of the kerfuffle has helped to obscure what was a pretty disastrous result, and it may also rob Mayor Pete of some of the momentum that he needed heading into New Hampshire.
Yeah, and of course Buttigieg is the person most likely to steal Biden's moderate voter support. So anything that kills Buttigieg's buzz, that's good news for Biden. Back to 2015, when Donald Trump chose an unorthodox way to criticise one of his opponent's tall tales.
How stupid are the people of Iowa? How stupid are the people of the country to believe this crap?
And Trump said this in Iowa. Well, you can guess what happened the week before the Iowa caucuses.
And what does Trump think about Iowa?
How stupid are the people of Iowa?
Donald Trump, New York values, not ours.
You know, my views are a little bit different than if I lived in Iowa.
I'm Ted Cruz, and I approve this message.
We don't know if Cruz's ad worked, but we do know that in the final few days, Ted Cruz turned a 4.5-point polling deficit into a 3-point victory. We should say, though, that Trump did win Iowa in the general election. No word on whether he still wondered,
how stupid are the people of Iowa?
So the candidates had packed up, flown east and started giving speeches in New Hampshire before any of those Iowa numbers came out. Next week, New Hampshire will hold their primary, but it is a primary, not a caucus. So a lot more like the elections we have here, and hopefully a lot less likely to go completely pear-shaped. Still, there is quite the rivalry over which of the first two states has the biggest say in who gets to be president. It was former New Hampshire Governor John Sununu that famously said Iowa picks corn, New Hampshire picks presidents. But was he right?
Nuh-uh.
Yup. The influence of Iowa and New Hampshire dates back to the 1970s. That was when, for the first time, voters got to choose the majority of delegates who decide the presidential nominees. Since then, Iowa has voted for the eventual winner of the Democratic presidential nomination 7 times in 10 contested caucuses. Not bad. But only 2 of the Democrats' nominees who are winners in Iowa went on to win the presidency, Jimmy Carter and Barack Obama. On the Republican side, Iowa's record in picking presidents is even patchier.
Oh, shoot. Go New Hampshire.
In 9 contested caucuses, just 3 Iowa winners have gone on to be the nominee, and only one of them, George W. Bush, went on to win the White House. OK, but what about New Hampshire?
Live free or die, man.
Among Democrats since the 1970s, there have been 10 contested primaries. 5 winners in New Hampshire went on to be the Democratic nominee, but just one, Jimmy Carter, went on to win the presidency. So that is a 2-1 win to Iowa.
Yeah!
As for Republicans, New Hampshire actually fares much better.
Giddy up now!
In 11 contested primaries, they've picked the eventual nominee 8 times, and 4 of them, Nixon, Reagan, Bush and Trump, won the presidential election that November. But in Iowa, Republicans tend to miss the mark. In 8 contested caucuses, they've only picked the nominee 3 times, and only one Iowa winner, George W. Bush, was elected president. And that was 20 years ago. So, New Hampshire wins on the Republican side 4-1.
Yeah!
But the takeaway from all that history is a little bit more nuanced. Neither Iowa nor New Hampshire necessarily pick who the president is going to be. They do, though, winnow the field dramatically. Only one future nominee of either party ever finished lower than third in Iowa. That was John McCain in 2008, and he didn't become president. That's why they say there are 3 tickets out of Iowa. But notice the last 4 Democratic nominees all won in Iowa, and that is significant. No future nominee of either party has finished lower than second in New Hampshire, although 3 future presidents did come second: Bill Clinton in '92, George W. Bush in 2000, and Barack Obama in 2008. So, history says after New Hampshire, it's a 2-horse race. But then again, history's being made all the time.
How about we make you history, boy?
When it was revealed in October last year that 78-year-old Senator Bernie Sanders had suffered a heart attack, his campaign appeared all but over. He fell into 3rd place in national polls. Elizabeth Warren overtook him as the progressive rival to Joe Biden. But 4 months later, Bernie is back, and after a strong showing in Iowa, he's leading in New Hampshire. To find out what that journey has been like and what makes Bernie Sanders different to his rivals, we spoke to his longtime economic advisor, Stephanie Kelton. Bernie Sanders, you've been working with him for years. He has a heart attack on the campaign trail. How did you hear about it? How did you feel about it?
Well, I heard about it, I guess the same way that most other people heard about it. I heard about it, somehow online, and I felt like I think most people pretty shocked. I mean, this is a guy who's remarkably healthy. I mean, by all outward appearances, the guy is unstoppable. He's 4 or 5 events a day, and I've known him to carry a schedule like that for many years. So I was shocked, like I think most other people.
It took a couple of days for the campaign to confirm that it was actually a heart attack rather than some other health-related incident. There was a bit of criticism around that. But when you found out how serious it was, were you thinking, oh my goodness, the guy's 78 years old, this is it, it's over? Or
no, because I think that what we found out pretty early on was that it actually wasn't all that serious. And, the reason for waiting a little bit was so that his wife Jane could make her way to where he was, and they could consult with doctors and get a sense of whether it was in fact going to be serious. And then when they realized that, this is a fairly standard procedure, I know a number of people who've had stents put in, and, of course he bounced back and was back on the campaign trail very quickly.
His polls took a little dip. At the same time, Elizabeth Warren sort of had that surge in September, October, and a lot of people were saying, OK, that's it, Bernie's done, yesterday's man. Elizabeth Warren's the new progressive hero. Just in the last few weeks, of course, they've gone the other way. Bernie's back. What's happened? What's changed?
Well, I mean, that phrase that you just used, Bernie's back, this was the phrase that was used at the big rally. He had the big comeback rally, the first major event that he did coming off of the heart episode. And I think 25,000 people turned out for that rally in New York. I was there, my kids were there. It was an incredible show of support. And I think it sent a really clear message that, the heart incident was not going to drag the momentum down, that the campaign was back. Of course, he had the endorsement of Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez by that point, and that was, I think, a shot in the arm that kept everybody excited about the momentum that this campaign has.
Now, Bernie's fond of pointing out, that is probably his elevator pitch, that every other wealthy country in the world has universal health care for less money than America. Why can't America? But as someone who lives in the rest of the world, I can tell you that not every other country, and in fact no other countries in the world, have completely free healthcare with no out-of-pocket expenses, no supplementary insurance, and everyone can get pretty much anything they want apart from plastic surgery and things like that. I suppose what I'm asking is why the specific nature of his Medicare for All pushes so much further than countries like Australia or England or France even have in their healthcare system.
Look, this is the guy's nature. He is not a guy. He is not a politician. He is not a senator who tinkers at the margins with things. When he thinks about, reforming something, it's really big transformational kind of what could we do if we were willing to really swing for the fences and go big and try to make healthcare as generous as it can be for the American people, so that people aren't driven into bankruptcy. You got more than 500,000 people every year going bankrupt because of medical debt in America. And so why not, in a sense, provide people the best healthcare on earth? We are the wealthiest country on earth, so why shouldn't we be able to provide even more generous benefits than any other country?
Is that all or nothing, Stephanie, or is that a little bit like Obama was criticised for not pushing for a government option, for settling and then kind of retreating from that settlement point? That if you go big, you go bold. Well, yeah, by the time it comes through Congress, it's less than that, but it's still better than it would have been. Or is it all or nothing for Bernie?
No, I mean, look, he's a political realist. He's been in the Senate. He knows how legislation moves through. He knows that, you don't get to draft the legislation and pass it yourself, that this has got to, go through the House, it's got to go through the Senate, and then it's going to come to his desk if he's president. And he can't control every moving part along the way. But what he's not going to do is negotiate against himself up front and start indicating, that there are things that he might be willing to do. What he's saying is, this is the standard I would like us to work for. And then we'll see what happens.
And you can see a lot more of that interview with Stephanie Kelton on Planet America's Fireside Chat, Friday, 8 p.m. on ABC News.
We'll also be talking then about the full-blown panic that the Democratic establishment's got going on at the moment about the very real prospect that Sanders could win their nomination. But, spoiler alert, a lot of their concerns surround one word in particular: socialism. Although Sanders himself is keen to point out,
I call myself a democratic socialist.
But everyone ignores that, so we will too. The reason why Democrats are so concerned about Sanders being a socialist,
a democratic socialist,
is because of polling like this from last year. Only 9% of independents and 13% of moderates viewed the term socialism favourably. In fact, according to Gallup last year, only 47% of people would even consider voting for a socialist. And that is exactly the same number as in 2015. So Sanders isn't changing anything. As far as independents go, it's not that much better either. On the parade of supposed unvotables, 17% fewer independents would even consider voting for a socialist than they would an atheist.
Woo-hoo!
Sorry, was that supposed to be Richard Dawkins or a pirate?
Well, you do it then!
Fine, whatever. Anyway, this all might be why 56% of Iowa Democrat caucus goers last week said that they thought a Democratic socialist would have a harder time defeating Trump. But let's look a little deeper than all this. It is true that just under 40% of Americans have had a positive view of socialism all decade. And if we break that up into parts and components, Democrats have indeed become a fair bit more positive about socialism, and Republicans have become a fair bit more negative, and independents, well, they've barely budged at all. But what happens if we drop all the socialism chatter and we just ask people how involved they want the government to be? Well, in the last few years, a lot more people seem to think the government should take active steps in every area where it can help its citizens. Socialism! And less people are favouring small government. But if we ask people whether they favour more services and more taxes, not so keen. So I think there might be a bit of confusion out there about socialism, and things become even more confused when you ask people what they think socialism actually means. Because there's all kinds of definitions out there, including, peculiarly, 6% of people who said socialism was being social or social media. I really don't think that is what socialism is. But PRI simplified things down to two basic definitions. Either basically Sweden or basically communist Russia. 65% of Democrats define socialism as free health insurance, retirement support, and free higher education. In other words, the Sweden option. Whereas 61% of Republicans define socialism as government control of utilities, transportation and communication. That's the communist Russia option. And this ambiguity between these two definitions may indeed explain some of that confusion that's out there. Although interestingly, members of the official Democratic Socialist Party themselves seem to be closer to the Republican definition. They write about nationalising the financial sector and introducing social ownership of corporations. Back in the 1970s, Bernie Sanders himself advocated for the nationalisation of most major industries, including energy companies, factories and banks. Now, that's not to say he wants to do that now, of course. In fact, Sanders has staffers, even as we speak, telling people in phone calls that by socialism, he means a healthcare system, school system, and a government that's reliable, accessible, and effective, whatever that means. So, the definition of socialism, it's a big mess. But there is really only one question that actually counts. Does any of this affect Bernie Sanders' polling? Well, Data for Progress ran a head-to-head Sanders versus Trump poll, and Sanders led 47 to 41. But then they ran another poll where they asked whether people supported Democrat Bernie Sanders, who wants to tax the billionaire class to help the working class, or Republican Donald Trump, who says Sanders is a socialist who supports a government takeover of healthcare. And the result was Sanders leading 47 to 42. Kind of the same, really. In other words, all this hyperventilating might be over something that makes no difference anyway.
Shiver me timbers!
You got that right, Dawkins.
Big, beautiful world.
Out of context, at the impeachment trial, Jay Sekulow auditions for the new Lost in Space.
Danger, danger, danger.
Trump's lawyer explains why she released a wild raccoon in the Senate chambers.
If both the law and the facts are against you, present a distraction.
And Jason Crow is ready to tell us who let the dogs out.
Thank you for that question. It's one that I've wanted to answer for some time now.
This has been the impeachment trial of Donald Trump.
It's been quite a long journey.
What a busy week it's been. The impeachment trial of President Donald Trump is almost done and dusted. Democrat hopes of calling new witnesses to appear before the Senate trial were dashed when they couldn't muster the support of at least 4 Republicans to reach a 51-vote majority. One of those crucial votes, Tennessee Republican Senator Lamar Alexander, explained his decision not to hear witnesses this way.
Well, I mean, if you have 8 witnesses who say someone left the scene of an accident, why do you need 9? I mean, the question for me was, do I need more evidence to conclude that the president did what he did?
So he's satisfied that Trump did put pressure on Ukraine to announce an investigation into the Bidens by withholding military aid.
I think he shouldn't have done it. I think it was wrong. Inappropriate was the way I'd say improper, crossing the line. And then the only question left is, who decides what to do about that?
And the answer is, Senator Alexander at least thinks the American people should be the ones to decide whether the president should be removed from office at the next election. Shouldn't be up to the US Senate. As a result, no witnesses, but the Senate will cast their final vote tomorrow on whether to remove President Trump. Nobody expects that 67 senators will vote to do that. So, Donald Trump has been impeached by the House. He is about to be acquitted by the Senate, and voters will have their say come November. The Democrats' lead impeachment manager, Adam Schiff, though, had this final appeal to Republicans. He said, history won't be kind to Trump or his supporters.
But if you find the courage to stand up to him, to speak the awful truth to his rank falsehood, your place will be among the Davids who took on Goliath. If only you will say enough.
Well, history might not be kind to Trump, but the present's been very generous indeed. Trump has just received the highest Gallup approval ratings of his entire presidency, including the honeymoon period. 49% approval is well within the re-election zone. Now, whether that's a short-term post-impeachment bounce like Bill Clinton got, or if it's because of the 63% of people who approve of the economy at the moment, we don't know. But this has been a really good few days for Trump.
Meanwhile, earlier today, Donald Trump became just the second impeached president to deliver a State of the Union address while still on trial in the Senate. And what an amazing piece of political theatre it was. It started with Trump refusing to shake Speaker Nancy Pelosi's hand. It ended with her literally tearing up his speech. in between, it was Trump the showman, presenting conservative shock jock Rush Limbaugh, who announced this week he has lung cancer, with the Medal of Freedom, and then reuniting a military family all live in the middle of his speech. And we'll have more to say about impeachment, the State of the Union, and the fallout from the whole Iowa debacle on Friday night's Fireside Chat on ABC News, when we'll be just 4 days out from the crucial New Hampshire primary.
And just 6 days out from when we hear the New Hampshire primary results. And you will find both Plain America and the Fireside Chat on iView, YouTube and Facebook, or on all three at once if you're a bit weird.
Good night.